Welcome. We're on the red couch with Vivian Ducat, president of a multimedia production company with the leading national clients that include the Library of Congress, the National Park Service, Columbia University, and the Museum of the City of New York. Vivian spent over 20 years writing, producing, and directing award-winning documentary films around the world for the BBC and PBS. Her series credits include The Story of English, The American Experience, and The Prize. Vivian's latest, All Me, The Life and Times of Winfred Rembert, is a powerful documentary of the bigotry endured by Rembert in the segregated South and the art that he creates to transform his painful memories into meaningful stories. Vivian, I'm delighted to have you on the red couch.
Oh, thank you. Delighted to be here.
I wanted to ask you how it was that you first met Winfred.
I went to a benefit for a program that one of my children is in, a program about the autism and the arts for a museum in New York, and the benefit was held at the Adelson Galleries, the Madison Avenue Gallery. I walked in as a parent. I looked around. I saw this incredible artwork on the walls, very vibrant, really eye-catching. Immediately saw that it was leather because someone went up to one of the paintings and touched it, and it was like, oh my God, they touched the painting, and then someone else said, well, it's leather. But there was nothing contextual on the walls. It was, you wouldn't have known what story lay behind the making of this art. Saw the man, who must have been the man in the corner, went up to Winfred, said, where did you learn how to do this? He said, prison. And just sort of like, and then I, got the reaction I mean he wanted, and then I asked him another question, and he told me the whole story of how he met Patsy, and he told it in this beautiful cadence of storyteller, and I thought, this man's a film. So then I thought, what this gallery needs is a short film about Winfred. So I sort of worked the floors, got the email addresses. The next day, dropped off some films. I emailed them a bunch of stuff. They met with me. They wanted to. They said, if you're going to make a film, it has to be almost immediate. Got it into the gallery within 2 weeks.
Wow.
Because the show was going to be on only to the end of May, and then they extended it as it turned out. Delivered the film, and in the making of the film realized how much more of a story there was about all the stuff about being chain gangs still into the early 1970s, stuff I never knew about. There was a much bigger film than just this is a man and this is how he does his artwork, and convinced them after about a couple of months that really to do a longer feature-length film, and here we are at the festival showing that film.
I adored it. I mean, I was telling you beforehand, I went through every range of emotion, and I fell in love with Winfred himself and his wife, Patsy. I mean, what is it like for you you're traveling with them. He's coming with you to a lot of the events and the film festivals. What is it like to have him there with you?
It's always something original. He's great. He's great with my kids. He's really funny. He's always, like honey, and bees. I mean, people are always attracted to him, and there's always some sort of a scene that goes on. And it's really interesting. We showed it in Bedford-Stuyvesant, which is a largely African-American neighborhood in Brooklyn the other day, and the whole discussion came up about, it was mostly an elder African-American audience. What should we do with our teenagers? How should we work with our kids? And he and Patsy got into a discussion that had nothing to do with the film, and kind of about almost like being elders and what they have thought about and done. And I mean, every time we show this, it's something else. There's some other twist to his interaction with people, and in that it's really interesting, because otherwise you hear the same, you would hear the same thing over and over again, but never with Winfred. It's always a new experience.
He's amazing. I mean, he has a contagious laugh. He has a beautiful smile. He seems like the film could have been really a downer. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
Thinking about just all the different subject matter. Almost being lynched, being on a chain gang for 7 years, and just enduring the sweat box. I mean, that's just painful to even hear about. And I'm just wondering what it was like to hear firsthand from someone who had really lived those tragedies and suffering.
You should know, by the way, that the sweatbox photograph in the film is actually from Florida. And there's another piece of Florida in there. There's a song that we use during a scene of the Confederate graveyard, which is in the center of Cuthbert, and that's a particular kind of old singing that my husband, who did the music research among many other aspects of this film, found a guy who still keeps that kind of traditional singing going, and allowed us actually to use it for free in the film because he wanted to get that tradition out there. It's hard stuff to listen to, and it's surprising stuff. It was surprising for me, which was good in a way, because you always put yourself in the position of the audience. So if I was surprised, if I felt all the things that I felt, then I knew that people who watched the film would feel that way as well. and it's when I was a freshman in college, Winfred was still in a chain gang. I find that kind of
Wow.
remarkable.
Yeah, yeah, incredible. I mean, this is so close to now. It's really sort of frightening to think that it's still, not that it's still necessarily going on, although, sounds like similar things are still enduring in the South a little bit.
Well, and I mean, the North, look, Winfred lives in a really poor neighborhood. There's a lot of gun violence around there. It's, within a mile from Yale. I mean, we those of us who come from the North kid ourselves that we don't have these issues, but we do. Things are expressed. The segregation is expressed in a different way. But it's all part of the culture as well. And I think that's one thing that doesn't come through, I think, as strongly in this film, because it was 78 minutes. It could have been longer. Last weekend, we were fishing around in our outtakes for additional material for whenever there's a DVD will be made. And there was more in there that had to do with later on in his life. And it was just so interesting to hear that again. And you regret what you don't put in. And on the other hand, if you put everything in, then the sort of dramatic flow is gone and you lose it. And this film was so hard to structure. I kept thinking I was never going to get it right. And then sort of one day it felt okay. It felt like, it flowed. And, I wasn't convinced in the making of it that there was going to be that day coming. It was just, either it was too sad too soon, or it was too one sort of test audience said it's too happy too soon, and then this hits you in the face and you can't have that. And it's like, how do we balance this right?
I mean, I think that's true of any documentary. What is the whole goal of a documentary? Is it to be inspiring? Is it to be educational? Is it to be entertaining? Or is it to be all of them?
I think it's to be all of them. And I think that I never worry about the product. I mean, maybe it's kind of self-centered, but I always think if I'm interested, if I'm entertained, then I'm happy. And I tend not to think about what people are going to think out there. What makes this more complicated is that there's a lot of emotional story stuff that's not as much about sort of the information. There are multiple stories here. We're talking about the love story between Winfred and Patsy.
Right.
We're talking about the historical story. We're talking about the story of him becoming an artist. We're talking about the story of him getting his art out there, and they're not the same stories. If you have too much historical storytelling, then it feels too much like a history documentary. If you have too much about just the art, you don't appreciate what a different story this is. If it's too much of the love story, so there was always trying to balance these strands and then and now. And we came to the conclusion we shouldn't do it chronologically, that his life we tried to have the structure of the film sort of reflect the complexity with which he proceeds through every day, where he dances sort of back and forth between his wealthy collectors with whom he's very comfortable, and where he lives and his neighborhood and his church and whatever, and his family. I mean, it's all he seamlessly goes in and out of all of this.
Yeah, it's brilliant. I thought you did a brilliant job, and I enjoyed every minute of it. Join us for a clip of All Me. And then stay tuned for part 2 of our interview with Vivian Ducat.
Chain gang is probably the worst thing you can ever do to a human being. I don't know they said slavery was tough, but, I just can't believe it was any tougher than being on the chain gang. The chain gang is just inhuman. It's a place where all dignity is taken from you. You're not a man anymore. It's designed to break you down physically and mentally.
Stay tuned for part 2 of this interview on the Red Couch.